Hello and welcome to the Aquarium Dilemmas podcast. I'm your host, Kerri, ScienceGal Aquatics, and today my co-host is
Jesse, and welcome to another exciting dilemma. We've went over a lot of different things from tank size, substrate, filtration, cycling a tank, and kind of why we do it.
It's been fun talking about all the different things, and we've done a pretty good job, I feel like.
Well, and now we're going to step to the very last basic step of water change and why it's important, and just hit on a few little mini topics of why we do it, why it's important for our fish, and some of the easiest, simplest ways to do it.
Yes, and there's a lot of different ways, and I feel like I've done a few different ways of water changing my aquariums over the years, but it was one of those things when I first started off. I water changed. I did. Like I've said in the past, it was sporadic. There was no routine with it. But I did water change, but I had not a clue why. I just was told that's what you did, so that's what I did, and I did not understand the importance in everything that came with water changing. That's really important to know. And the process, taking water out and putting water in, is not complicated. But the reason of why we do water changes in the fish hobby, the aquarium hobby, is important to understand the reasons why, not just do water changes to do water changes. And I still don't know everything, but I feel like it's important to share what I know and what I've picked up along the way.
And
the mistakes I've done over the years.
If you're new to the channel, you can go back and check out our episode on cycling a tank, which will tie into why you're water changing, and it will link everything together, kind of make a little more sense completely to you. We'll touch on a little bit of it, but we're going to stay more to what we're doing with the water change and the related topic of how it's helping the cycling of the tank.
Yeah, it's helping in a way, but I feel like at this point hopefully you've got your tank established. It's been running for a while. You've got your bacteria and everything built up. You've let your fish acclimate. You've had them for a little bit. Now it's time to maybe do your first water change, or maybe you've done water changes and you don't really know why, or maybe it's just a refresh. But when it comes down to it, to get to the point, I guess, the whole reason why you need to water change comes to taking the bad things out of the water, to put it pretty basically, but the nitrates are what, with it, the RA, because I don't pronounce them, where probably you can tell the difference, but that's the main reason why you need to water change. And you don't have to there's not like a one time a week, Monday at 5 o'clock, I'm going to water change all my tanks and everything's going to be happy. Like, there's a little bit more to it. But when it comes, basically, there's things that build up that's bad in your water, and the only way you can get them out is through water changing.
Correct.
To put it very simply.
Yes. So first off, let's go with what you're going to need to have the simplest way to do a water change. You're brand new to the hobby. You've got your aquarium and it came with the filter and the kit and all that good stuff. Well, what am I going to need to do the easiest water change I can do?
Well, and that comes down to each individual person. I think what works easiest for me might not work easiest for somebody else, but I've made some mistakes through the years that wasn't mistakes, that was bad. It just cost me a lot of time, energy, and effort to carry buckets and I had like 1 gallon drinking water containers that I would fill up one at a time, and I would take whatever bucket I had, whether it was a 1 gallon or a 5 gallon bucket, and I'd drain out the water, and then I would put water back in 1 gallon at a time. And sometimes I would take it right out of the sink and I would dump it right in. Sometimes I would let it sit overnight, but there's easier ways to do it, but that's not a wrong way if that works for you. It's just it's more time consuming, and it would take me, as I got more tanks, it would take me, because I water changed like this for a very long time. It wasn't until recently, in the last handful, probably 3 years, that I've upgraded my system, but I have more tanks now too. But I would drain it with an aquarium siphon or an aquarium vac or some kind of
aquarium siphon. That's one.
That's why a bucket is a fish keeper's best friend.
I'm gonna go. You went way over it. I'm talking for the person who got one fish tank.
Well,
one fish tank.
It doesn't matter if you have one fish tank or a lot of fish tanks. You still need. I feel like you need an aquarium vac, like a bucket, and then whichever way you decide. There's a couple different ways, various ways that you could put the water back in. But usually when you're water changing, that's when you kind of scrape some of the algae too. And I've tried different things through the years, but I like an aquarium type sponge and a razor blade to get the algae off the front of my glass. But for just basic tools to get the water out, an aquarium vac and a bucket.
There you go.
And also there's tricks to starting those siphons, and I still, to this day, after all these years keeping fish, I still can't correctly start an aquarium vac the correct way. But however you wish to start that aquarium vac is the right way.
and what we're doing with this water change, the simplest way, you got your siphon, you're going to have a 5-gallon bucket. We're going to take out a certain percentage of water. And that is all dependent on size of the tank, what's in the tank, and the bio load of that tank. Whether it's planted or whether it's just...
There's a lot of factors that comes down to it.
But the main thing is, if there is excess waste, be it food, fish poop, whatever, excess things that are biodegrading at the bottom of the tank, that is what you're probably going to be siphoning out to start with. And then, obviously, the byproduct of that is you're taking out water as well, which taking out a certain amount of that water is good because, as Kerri said, you're taking out the nitrates that have been building up in that tank from the fish.
Yes.
In the previous episode, we've already talked about cycling it. So you got the good bacteria, it's breaking the ammonia down, turning it into nitrite. Then you got the bacteria that's breaking that down and turning it into nitrate. Well, the nitrate's going to stay in that tank.
Yes.
The only way to get rid of it is to water change it out.
Yes. And it is less toxic than ammonia and the I will never pronounce them right, but the ammonia and the say it, Jesse.
Nitrite?
Yes, that one. They are more toxic, definitely. And the nitrate it's still something you don't want to build up in your tank by any means. But the fish, if you have 5 parts per million in your tank, they're gonna be probably for the most part okay. There's always exceptions to the rule, and there's some fish that are more sensitive. But when you're getting up to the 20 parts per million, that's when it's probably going to start being more damaging to your fish, and you're going to want to do water changes to get that out. But that's why testing your water, especially in the beginning, is so important, because you can't eyeball that and know what that level is to know if you're going to need a water change. But that's usually, there's always, like I said, there's always exceptions to the rule. If you have a sick fish or a cloudy water, there's always exceptions that you might need to water change that's not on your regular schedule that you have been performing. There's always special reasons. And water changes, honestly, that's your first go-to step. If you notice something going haywire or a little bit off in your tank, that's your first step to do a water change. But each tank, whether you have one tank or you have a fish room like I do, each tank, whether they're across the fish room or right next to each other, they could be set up the same with the same fish. They're still going to be different, and that's why testing is so important so you can see what that level is, because some tanks, like Jesse said, if you have a planted tank and those plants are working with you to help kind of cycle some of that out and use it as food for the plants, then that's working with you and you don't have so much levels building up because you have something in there helping. But if you do not have a planted tank, it's going to build up really quick. So those tanks are going to have to be on a different water changing schedule and even different amounts of water. No two tanks, you can't, and I'm guilty of this. I will take 10 to 20% out of every single tank and assume it's good, and that's, I water changed it, and I even fall guilty into that. I'm not testing like I should. I eyeball my water changes and I'm like, that I feel like that's enough, they're doing good. But that's why testing is so important until you do get a feel of that one particular tank or your fish room of tank. Each tank is so drastically different and they react different, and each bioload of your fish is different. So that's why you always hear test your water, because it is so important, because that's the only way, whether you have a master test kit, or I personally like to use the strips because they're easier. But as long as you have a way to test that level to know when you need to water change.
Yep. So you have a ballpark of what you're going at.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to that with the plants and everything, the plants at the same time, they
Mm-hmm.
are enjoying that nitrate. They're enjoying that fish waste and some of that. But at the same time, those plants are also taking certain minerals and things out of your water that your fish may actually like. That might be more beneficial for your fish. So a water change actually helps you in that aspect as well, because you're putting, unless you're using RO water, which is just distilled water, and then you're remineralizing it, which there is a lot of aquarists out there that do that. But
I just don't have any experience or know-how, but they seem to work well.
and that is very species specific, tank specific, and you have to know what you're doing. But for the average hobbyist, which I will say we are the average to above average hobbyist, you're going to use your tap water. You're going to use a dechlorinator, and everyone's tap water has a certain set of minerals in it. Some of them have more calcium, some have less, some have a little bit. Your water will generally be a little higher in pH or a little lower in pH, and that all goes back to what Kerri was saying, ScienceGal was saying, that test your water, and once you get that tank established, you've cycled it, you keep testing it, then further down the road the eyeballing can come into play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's fish keepers out there that are very on it and test all the time, and they just do that. But I am not. I test a lot more in the beginning, and if I see a problem, that's when I test. But I really do need to get back into the habit of testing more often, because I do have some algae that, even though I don't hate it like I used to, it would help. But I know also a big mistake that I made when I was learning about why we do water changes. I just assumed too, let's say I have my 20-gallon or my 10-gallon tank, and like I'm doing my 10 to 30% water changes on it, and I just assume when I did my whatever I chose to do water change, it was taking all of that out. But it's not. You still have, if you take 20% of your water out, you're still going to have some nitrates in the water. And so when you put that water back in there, it dilutes down, yes. But if you have a high reading, let's say, I don't know, making up a number, it's 50 parts per million, and you take 20% of that water out, it might be down to 30 parts per million. And then you put water back in there and it will dilute, but you still have some in there. So if you're taking another reading, another, testing strip, or another, you get your master kit back out and you're still reading a little high, maybe you should up your water change or do
more water changes frequently.
Maybe do 2 that week instead of 1. And once you get that lined out, then you'll get to know that tank, and you'll know that I need to do 10% Monday.
Twice a week.
Yeah, Monday and Saturday. Or I need to do, if it's a cichlid tank or you got a lot of plecos and there's a high bioload, maybe you need to do 50%. You won't know truly, and the only way you're going to know is if you test your water. And there's a lot of things that go in it. Like you said, if you're overfeeding, which a lot of us do, we overfeed, that's going to increase the need for a water change too, because all of that's breaking down. Not all your fish ate all that food, and that's breaking down. And if you don't have plants and you have a pleco in there and it's always going to the bathroom, that's going to be breaking down. So there's a lot of different factors that influence how often, and only you know with the tank you have. But testing, and kind of when you first do if you're new and it's your first couple water changes on that tank, then test it, and you're going to have a period where you're going to see a pattern and know, okay, I need to do a little bit more, or I need to do a little bit less. Or like my 55-gallon guppy tank, it's got it's got shrimp and guppies. It's heavily planted, so I don't have to do a water change once a week on that tank. It's okay if I do a 10-20% water change once a month. It's so depending. That's the reason it's important to get to know your fish, get to know your tank, test your tank, and really spend that time. And that's a great time to spend with your tank when you're water changing and kind of cleaning up and watching your fish and testing it. It's fun to interact with your tank then. You can see so much that maybe you would miss if you're not actively doing that.
Yep, you can see in your substrate if there's anything growing in there, like if you are starting to get some algae or mold, anything that could be going wrong there. You can look at your plants, see if you've been leaving the light on too long, you've got some yellowing, or they need pruned. If you have live plants and they need to be pruned back, I know I'm big about not pruning my plants enough. I need to prune them more.
I was just so excited to get them to grow. Now we're learning how to, like you said, kind of prune them back. I'm just so excited to they're just so fantastic. I love live plants, and I'm so glad I ventured into that, because it's unbelievably helpful to have plants in your tank, live plants in your tank. It's so helpful.
Back to the water change at hand, though. The other reason you're water changing is a lot of the stuff you cannot see. You can't see the nitrate. You can't see the phosphates. You can't see all that. You can see the excess stuff that falls to the bottom, anything that's trying to biodegrade and break down inside that tank that you're going to want to get out, and that's obvious. But you can't see inside the water column, so testing and knowing that you're taking some of that out and you're putting back in minerals that are going to be helpful to your fish, to your plants. That is the most important in my mind.
Yes, and like with I have a lot of plants now, and I do have a lot more guppies than anything else. But even doing those smaller water changes, that time when you add all that water back in, you're naturally kind of remineralizing all of your tank. You're adding oxygen back into your tank. You're adding it might be a neutral playing field when it comes to ammonia, nitrates and nitrites and pH and everything, but it's really helpful to make sure you do that, because it's not just, there's so much that goes into it. And it's just overall good. I know some people in the past, including myself, I would wait way too long, and I'm like, well, they look happy, they're doing good, but really they just were not. I needed to water change more often. I really did. And I wish going back I knew so much more, but I was so young, I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Well, and your fish and just to lightly touch on the pH thing, your fish, your plants, that there's a lot that can go on there with that pH. Your plants can take enough minerals and things out of the water to affect your pH. So by doing that water change, you're keeping that pH and by testing, you're keeping that pH more at a stable level all the time for your fish. So your fish are going to be a lot happier that way.
Yeah, it's very true.
Just to hit that one little pH point there that's, I mean, us with the guppies, we like to keep the pH a little more to the to the alkalinity side, a little harder. Well, it's a little heavier.
Well,
but they enjoy that
yeah.
water, and our water naturally, our tap water, and we have tested it. It is very hard, and we have a lot of calcium buildup. That's our battle. So when we do a water change and clean a tank, a razor blade is our friend.
Yes, and I know, like, going back, I just feel like I've made so many mistakes, and I've learned from them, but at the same time, I wish I knew more back in the day. But, like, I don't even know how to start. Besides just don't use the 1 gallon drinking water tubs. There's a much easier way to do that than hauling 1 gallon drinking tubs at a time to refill your water. But I know that there's different tools like Pythons out on the market that really do help. I just haven't personally used them. From not being able, like, not using them at all, the only worry I would have is just making sure I didn't get sand that would suck it up and go down the drain. But like I said, I have not used them to even know if that's a problem. And we'll go in here in a second on what we use now, which is much helpful. But if you can avoid carrying buckets, it's really helpful. And don't over clean. When I say water change, now with the plants that I have, I don't have to gravel vac everything out of the tank, because the plants do break that down and use it. But if you don't have plants in your tank and you have a high bioload fish, you're probably going and should gravel vac more, but don't over clean. When we say water change, usually now I'll just put the aquarium siphon in the water and suck out the water, and then I'll put it into another trash can with a pump, and I use it for our garden, it's changed our gardens a lot. Like, wow. But you don't have to get, when you are doing water changes, and I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to say this, but you don't have to get every single piece of fish poop out of the tank. You don't have to get every single piece of algae out of the tank, because you're not going to. And you don't have to drain that tank all the way down to there's nothing left, trying to clean every speck. Don't do that. So really do test your water. Look into the nitrogen cycle. Know why we have bacteria. Listen to all kinds of different things and really know why that bacteria helps you, what feeds it, what breaks down, so you know how important it is not to strip everything out. And if you use tap water like I have in the past, and I've ran out of water conditioner. I do water changes in the past in the middle of the night, and I didn't have water conditioner. Do I recommend using it? Yes. But if you don't have it, and all you have is your buckets, and you're filling them up like I did, 1 gallon at a time, just set that water out for 24 hours.
Yes. 24 hours plus is what is recommended.
Yes. Let it kind of gas out. Let that chlorine that's in the water, do not put that water in your tank while it's there. But if you don't have water conditioner, just set it aside and let it gas out, and then use it the next day to fill up your tank.
The chlorine and the chloramines will, in time, evaporate out of the water. Once you've ran it out of your tap, you put it in a 5-gallon bucket, set it aside, as ScienceGal said, set it aside, let it sit there for over 24 hours. Then, by then, all of that will have 99% of it will have evaporated and dissipated from the water. You can add it to the water, and because if you were to add that tap water directly into your tank that has been cycled, and shameless plug, check out the other episode on that, because that talks about more into why we dechlorinate water.
Yeah, we go into more detail.
But you pour that chlorinated water in there, you are doing nothing but killing your cycle. You're killing all of your beneficial bacteria.
Yes.
Because chlorine is put in your tap water to not grow bacteria so that you can drink it safely.
Yes. And like I said, in years past, I would over clean my tank. I would rinse everything in the sink and put it right back in. And then I would fill up that sink water and dump it right into my fish aquarium. And did the fish all die every time? No, they didn't. But they were not thriving. So just please don't do that. But now I have my system. Like I said, I've never used a Python. I know they come highly recommended, but I've never used one. But if they hook up to your sink and then you can put the water, I believe it's easy to take the water in and out of your tank. But now I have a 55-gallon trash can that I use for my clean water. And then I have another small trash can that I dump my old water in. And then each has a pump and each has a garden hose that's only used for whatever. It's either the clean water or the bad water. And there's I don't know the valve at the end of it, but it's got something that I can turn it on and off. And there's, like I said, there's a pump in it. So I'll drain the water out into a bucket and then dump it into the dirty trash can for the dirty water. And we pump that out to our garden. And then the clean, I'll still let it sit overnight, especially if I have the time, and let it sit overnight. I'll use some water conditioner. And when you do use water conditioner, use it by the instructions. You don't want to use too much either. And then I'll fill up the tanks that way. And it's much easier than carrying all those buckets up and down the steps or between rooms and getting it all over the floor. There's so many spilled dirty fish tank water buckets on carpet, and it's such an important part of the hobby. You can spend so much time getting to know your fish during this time, and it's really enjoyable. Don't treat it like a chore. It's a fun time, but there are easier ways, and I cannot express easier ways than carrying those 1 gallon drinking tubs at a time. And when you have a 55 or a 75-gallon tank, that takes a long time to refill that.
Exactly. Well, and I'm going to go with, if you're brand new to the aquarium hobby, you're going to have your normal aquarium siphon. You can get it any pet store, and that's still what we use to take the water out of ours. That's the easiest way.
It is. For me.
You can, again, going back to sucking up that big debris, you want to get that out of there. It doesn't need to decompose anymore. It'll clog your filter up. There's a whole laundry list of problems it could create. You get that out of there, and then whatever other water you feel that you've tested that you need to take out, that amount, up to that amount, to do your water change. And then you can dump it outside, dump it however. And all you really need, if you're just doing one tank and it's not a large tank, is just another 5-gallon bucket. Fill it up, use your dechlorinator, wait a little while, and then slowly pour it in. And I've done it many, many times. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the trash can method because we can let water set and always have a little bit.
It's on wheels.
Always have a little bit of water on backup if we see something needs topped off, or if something is for going wrong, we can do an immediate water change. So in that aspect, it's very handy. On a handyman side note for any of those listening, all I'm using as pumps in those is the actual sump pumps that you would use on a house.
Yeah, we got them at Lowe's. They're very helpful. They're not anything huge. They were one of the smaller size, but they work so great.
Yep. You buy a nice high dollar garden hose with a thick wall inside, so it's not leaching into your water, and you just put an adjustable valve on the end of that garden hose, and you can adjust the flow going into every one of your tanks once you plug your sump pump in and you're pumping the water into your tank, you can adjust the flow so you're not disturbing your plants, your fish, depending on whether they like a lot of flow in their tank or not.
Yeah.
It is very, very handy.
So I guess kind of just wrapping up a little bit, the purpose of your water changes in just kind of general terms is you're going to try and you want to remove those nitrates out of your tank.
Nitrates, debris. There's a lot of other stuff in there.
And my biggest reason that I would have to do an extra water change or I'd have a level spot, usually it came down to and I'm still guilty of it, I will overfeed from time to time. And that's for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of newer fish keepers out there, overfeeding is probably a huge factor for a spike in one of your readings. And if you're water changing and you're testing the way you're supposed to and you have that level, remember that when you are water changing, those nitrates are not going to completely come out. It's going to dilute down, and so you need to test to know if that was enough of a water change. That's really the only way you're going to know if you need to do more water changes, take out more water. Maybe you took out too much. Maybe it's down to all 0 and you shouldn't have maybe done a 75% water change twice a week. That was just too much. So you really testing your water, especially if you're new during the beginning of your cycle, and continuing testing through water changing. Maybe it takes a couple of times or every single time for a while. The only way you're going to know is if you test while you water change, because that nitrate is going to go down. Like I said, if it's like a 40, it might go down to a 30%, and then you put your water in there and it's going to dilute. So that, I hope that makes sense, but the only way that you can judge if you did more or you did too much or you need to do more water changes with your tank is to test it and see what that reading is, because you're not unless you do 100% water change, you're still going to have some in there, especially if you're overfeeding like I was doing water changes, but I was like, well, this isn't ever really going down. So you need
some
to
in there is okay. Yeah, nitrate,
I feel like somewhere around that 20 parts per million is where I gauge.
Nitrate is okay. You just don't
To
want too much
yeah,
of it.
you don't
obviously.
want it. Can't still be
if you're
harmful.
using that master test kit, it's going to tell you.
It's going to tell you.
And if you have if you got the nitrite or the ammonia,
then you just need to do a water change.
Now you're in a whole nother ball game. You're going to be doing water changes, and that means you don't have enough beneficial bacteria that's doing its thing.
And yeah, that's true. But there's a lot of different things that can pop up with an aquarium. There's a long list, and we'll probably get through them all eventually over time. But if I have a problem or I have a reading that I don't like, the first spot, the first stage, is water change. I start at water changing and then go down. But that's my first go-to if I see a problem or I have a high reading, is start at water changing. Water changing helps so many things. It's a good starting point. If you have an issue or you're new and you're not really sure, just do a water change. Start small and work your way up. Test your water and see if you need to do more the next day, especially if it's a smaller tank, because it's hard to do a small water change on a small tank. It's real easy to take out a lot of water. So
well, that's a whole nother subject. But a very small tank, like a nano tank or a micro tank, as they call them, it is so easy for the levels to get out of balance because the volume of water.
It's just so small.
When you have 55 gallons of water, you have a lot more room for error.
Especially if you don't have...
When you only have 2 gallons of water, 2 gallons of water, you could take the same parts per million of nitrate in that 2 gallons of water versus 55 gallons of water is a totally different ballgame.
Well, hopefully this helped explain water changes to you and why they are important, because they are so important and they do help in so many different aspects of the tank. When you have, like I said, something pop up, just do a water change.
Well, what's your let's go top three real quick wrap up of your water change keys. I got 3.
Well, you start first because I don't know what.
My top 3 water change keys would just be any excess debris, test, and always make sure and use a dechlorinator.
Yeah, that's all good. That's good advice. If you have a high nitrate or any type of high reading, just do a water change. Learn, including me. I've been in fish keeping for a long time, and even I need to test my water more often. Don't just eyeball it and think it's okay. But yes, a 5-gallon bucket is always your best friend during a water change. I like to aquarium vac. It's really easy to over aquarium vac and try to get all of the debris out, but mainly right now, since I do have shrimp, the guppies don't have a high bioload, and I have a lot of plants, so I just kind of spot clean it. But if I've overfed and something didn't get eaten, like if there's a veggie wafer or something, that's usually what I will spot clean when I aquarium vac now. I don't worry about, and it's really hard not to get it all out. But since the tanks are so heavily planted, it having some of that debris on the bottom of the tank is kind of helpful. So it just depends on your tank. If you don't have plants in there and you have like my pleco upstairs, yes, we do need to gravel vac that tank more often because it's such a heavy bioload fish. But the guppies, if I miss some here and there, I don't freak out like I used to. I just don't. But I guess the point when it comes down to it is test your water, see where your nitrates lie. That will kind of help you gauge where you need to go. Especially if they're reading high, then you need to do a water change and test it again, see if you need to do another one a day later. But if it's reading below, I don't know where, I've read it somewhere, I've heard it somewhere, but somewhere around that 20 parts per million, you want it under that. That's kind of where I've always gauged when I do use my test strips. That's where I gauge if I need to do more or less. And remember, it doesn't all come out of the water. It just dilutes down. So, yeah, I hope that kind of helped you.
Well, for more on these subjects, stay tuned for more episodes.
It's been fun going down and talking these topics and learning together.
Oh, absolutely.
There's still so much to learn. I
so
have
many...
a better grasp on things than I've ever had in my life in my tanks, even though there's some spots here and there, especially with the algae that I could... But they're just overall so much more healthy and interactive, and everything just is so much better now that I've took the time to know.
There's so many more little topics that we're going to keep diving into one episode at a time. But if you'd like to check us out on ScienceGal Aquatics, check out Kerri.
Yes.
Be awesome on YouTube.
It's fun to have you here with us. Thank you so much. But yeah, always go check out ScienceGal Aquatics on YouTube. You're always invited. And leave us a comment. Let us know you're there.
Yep. And you can always catch us every Sunday on a live stream. We'd love to hear from you.
But thank you so much. Thank
and
you for
until
listening.
the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.